She spilled champagne on a Mafia king. And the room went so silent, she heard the glass trembling in her hand. Evelyn Harper had only come to the gala because her cousin begged. She was an accountant in a borrowed blue dress, standing beneath chandeliers that made everyone look richer and colder than they were. Then she turned too fast. Champagne splashed across Cole Mercer's black suit. Around them, conversations died. No one laughed. No one stepped in. They only stared, as if she had just slapped a loaded gun out of his hand. Cole looked down at the stain, then back at her. He did not shout. He smiled. That was worse. And as cold Chicago rain beat against the windows, Evelyn realized one accident had just made her visible to the most dangerous man in the city. Evelyn fled down the cold stone steps, her damp dress clinging to her knees. Behind her, the mansion glowed gold, spilling soft jazz into the storm like nothing terrible had happened inside. She dragged freezing air into her lungs. Then her mother called her name. Ruth hurried after her, one hand gripping her coat, her face tight with the kind of panic rich people trained others to hide. She demanded to know whether Evelyn understood what she had done. Evelyn tried to brush it off as a spilled drink, but Ruth lowered her voice. That was Cole Mercer. The name meant nothing to Evelyn, yet everyone inside had reacted as if she had crossed a man who did not forgive. Ruth stood under the rain, stunned that Evelyn did not know. The Mercers owned shipping lines, security firms, warehouses, judges and, according to the whispers, things nobody put on paper. Evelyn, soaked and nervous, muttered that it sounded like a terrible business magazine. Ruth grabbed her arm and told her not to joke. People did not embarrass Cole Mercer and simply walk away. Evelyn looked back at the mansion. Guests were still watching from behind the glass, pretending not to. She insisted it had been an accident. Ruth said men like Cole did not care about accidents. But Evelyn could not forget his face. He had not looked angry. He had looked interested. And that scared her more than rage. Ruth's panic softened into exhaustion. She said she had only wanted Evelyn to meet useful people in Madison's world. Evelyn almost laughed. Those people had ignored her until she became a scandal with a champagne flute. A black car pulled up, and Evelyn slipped inside before her mother could say more. As the driver pulled away, the mansion shrank behind rain-streaked glass. Her phone buzzed. Madison had sent one message. "You have no idea what you just did." Evelyn stared at it until the screen went dark. The driver caught her eye in the mirror and asked if the party had been rough. Evelyn leaned against the cold window and said that was one word for it. By the time Evelyn reached her apartment, her shoes were soaked through. Her cat sat on the counter, judging her like a landlord with unpaid rent. She dropped her purse and thanked him for his support during public humiliation. The quiet apartment wrapped around her. Laptop open. Spreadsheets waiting. Stale coffee in the mug beside it. Numbers made sense. People did not. She changed into sweatpants and scrubbed at the makeup under her eyes. In the mirror, she looked tired. Ordinary, safe. Then she remembered Cole Mercer watching her leave. Calm as a man who had already decided something. She checked the deadbolt once. Then again. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, Evelyn waited for the night to stop feeling like a warning. By morning, the rain had turned to wet snow. Evelyn woke to Madison calling again and again. When she answered, Madison did not bother with hello. "Why did you run?" Evelyn tried to joke, but Madison cut her off. Cole Mercer did not casually notice people. If he knew your name, it meant something. Evelyn sat up, suddenly awake. Madison whispered that the Mercer family had been tied to crooked judges, missing witnesses, union bosses, and men who vanished before trial. Nobody could prove it, but nobody needed proof to be afraid. Evelyn looked out at the gray street below, where a man carried coffee and a bus hissed at the curb. The world looked normal. That made the warning feel even uglier. Madison said Cole had spent years cleaning up the family business. Hospitals loved his donations. Reporters loved his tailored answers. But old fear did not disappear because a man bought clean suits. Evelyn argued that rich people loved turning gossip into horror stories. Madison's voice went sharp. Powerful men did not notice ordinary women unless they wanted something. Evelyn looked down at her chipped mug and said he had only asked for her name, not her blood type. They hung up. But the joke did not help. The apartment felt too quiet. She told herself she was not afraid. Then she checked the deadbolt a third time. By 8:30, she was walking into the office, hungry for a place where everything still followed rules. The office occupied 2 floors of a building that smelled like burnt coffee, copier heat, and cheap ambition. It was not glamorous, but Evelyn understood it. Messy numbers came in. She made them confess. Her boss, Graham Voss, barked at her before she reached her desk, demanding a file she had already sent. She forwarded it again without comment. Around her, young analysts bragged about expensive dinners, weekend trips, and people they pretended to know. No one offered coffee. No one noticed her hands still shaking from the night before. That was usually the best part of the job. Invisibility gave her room to breathe. But by noon, the photo had reached the office, and invisibility was gone. Tessa from compliance leaned over Evelyn's cubicle with a phone in her hand. There she was on the screen. Blue dress, wide eyes, champagne frozen mid-splash across Cole Mercer's chest. The caption had already turned her into a joke, or worse, a target. In the photo, Cole did not look furious. He looked amused, almost pleased. Tessa raised an eyebrow and said he either wanted to ruin Evelyn's life or buy her a building. Neither option sounded comforting. Evelyn stared at the image, feeling her skin heat as coworkers pretended not to look. The worst part was not being mocked. It was knowing one blurry photograph had carried her straight into a world where jokes could become threats. Graham called her into his office before lunch. The photo sat open on his monitor like evidence. He closed the door too gently. That was never good. He mentioned federal interest in Cole Mercer's businesses, then said the firm valued discretion. Evelyn understood the translation. Women like her were supposed to keep their heads down and cause no mess. She kept her voice steady and said her private life had nothing to do with her work. Graham smiled without warmth and asked if she was sure this was private. Anger sharpened her focus. She returned to her desk and buried herself in reports, building perfect formulas like barricades. If everyone wanted to stare, she would give them nothing sloppy to find. That evening, Evelyn stepped into freezing air and stopped. A polished black car waited at the curb. It did not look parked. It looked placed. A driver in a dark coat approached and handed her a thick cream envelope. He knew her name. That was the first violation. Inside was a dry cleaning receipt, paid in full, and a handwritten note from Cole Mercer requesting a private apology over dinner. The words were polite. The paper was expensive. Somehow, that made it feel less like an invitation and more like proof that he could reach her anywhere. Evelyn looked up and down the busy street. No one else seemed concerned. The car door opened with a soft click, and her stomach tightened. Cole had made the trap almost elegant. He did not order her into the car. He gave her a choice, which somehow made the pressure worse. If he had forced her, she could have hated him cleanly. Instead, he left the door open and waited. Evelyn pulled out the card and called the number. When he answered, his voice was calm, low and too close. She accused him of crossing a line. He said her cousin's fiancé had introduced him to the firm. As if that explained knowing where she worked, the city roared around her. But all she heard was the way he said her name. Evelyn told him if he wanted an apology, he would meet her in public on her terms. What followed was a quiet battle disguised as scheduling. Evelyn refused the black car, the private room, and any location where his people could swallow the exits. Wicker Park, Lou's Diner, 6:30. No hovering bodyguards. Cole paused long enough for her to hear the calculation. She had dragged the king off his marble board and into fluorescent light. He finally agreed. Then she added one more rule. She would pay for her own meal. He almost sounded entertained when he said that was unnecessary. Evelyn said it was not a negotiation. On the other end, Cole Mercer gave a soft laugh, and for the first time all day, she wondered whether danger could have a sense of humor. Lou's Diner was all sticky tables, bitter coffee, and waitresses who had seen enough men to be impressed by none of them. Cole arrived at exactly 6:30, dark coat dusted with snow. His presence too expensive for the cracked vinyl booth. The contrast was almost ridiculous. He looked like a priceless painting hung in a garage. Marlene, the waitress, handed him a menu and asked if he wanted coffee or if he was too important for caffeine. Evelyn nearly choked. Cole ordered coffee like a man accepting a sentence. They sat across from each other, both too aware of the space between them. Outside, a dark sedan rolled past the diner once, slow enough for Cole's eyes to follow it. Evelyn ordered meatloaf for him before he could choose. A small punishment, but it pleased her. Cole studied her as if he was trying to decide whether she was brave or reckless. Maybe both. The silence between them was crowded with questions. Then he surprised her by apologizing for the car. No excuse. No smooth speech. Just an apology. Evelyn asked if she should be afraid of him. He answered no, then glanced toward the window again. The dark sedan had parked across the street, engine running. Evelyn noticed this time. Cole's face stayed calm, but his jaw had changed. Marlene dropped off their food, and suddenly the diner felt less public than it had a minute before. Evelyn wrapped both hands around her mug and asked about his family, partly because she wanted his eyes away from the street. Cole looked back at her. His father had died 4 years earlier, leaving behind warehouses, debts, enemies, and a reputation that still walked into rooms before Cole did. The old man believed fear lasted longer than loyalty. Cole said it like a fact, not a confession. Evelyn should have backed away right there. Instead, she listened harder. What unsettled her was not his darkness. It was that he did not decorate it. He admitted the ugly parts without asking her to forgive them. When she asked if he believed his father had been wrong, Cole's eyes returned to the window. He said someone outside was trying to find out. Cole cut into the meatloaf with the precision of a man signing a treaty. When he admitted it was good, Evelyn teased him for surviving ordinary food, and a real laugh broke out of him. For a second, he looked younger, less like a headline and more like someone who had forgotten how to relax. Then a camera flash winked from across the street. Evelyn saw it reflected in the coffee urn. Cole did too. Neither of them moved. He asked about her work as if nothing had happened. Evelyn told him numbers did not flatter, lie for attention, or pretend not to see what was missing. If a ledger failed to balance, truth was hiding somewhere inside it. Cole smiled faintly and said he liked that about her. Evelyn said he counted exits. Cole replied that she did too. She shook her head. She watched doors to avoid small talk. He watched them as if war might walk in carrying a gun. Something shifted in his face. He called it an old habit. Evelyn said softly that it sounded lonely. Outside, the sedan pulled away, leaving only wet tire tracks and one man on the corner pretending to text. The warning sat between them, unspoken later. Evelyn insisted on paying for herself. Cole did not argue, did not mock, did not turn it into a performance. He let her pay. Then he left a tip so large that Marlene silently mouthed, "Marry him," from behind the counter. Outside, snow thickened beneath the street lamps. They stood under the awning while traffic hissed over wet pavement. Cole removed his coat. Evelyn refused it before he finished lifting it from his shoulders. He did not push. He only held it open and said he disliked watching her shiver. The quiet answer irritated her because it worked. She slipped into the coat, surrounded at once by cedar wool and his body heat. Cole put his bare hands in his pockets and kept a careful distance. Down the block, the man from the corner disappeared into an alley. Cole noticed but stayed with her. He admitted he wanted to see her again. Evelyn told him it was a bad idea. Cole said he knew. Evelyn asked if he was always this calm. Cole's eyes moved over her face before he answered. He said he lost control only when something mattered. The words settled too heavily between them. She handed back his coat before she could get used to the warmth. A second date was not a promise. She said it was a maybe. And he was never to send a car to her office again. Cole accepted both terms. As she walked toward the train, he called after her that he had enjoyed the evening. She refused to turn around. But a dangerous warmth spread through her chest anyway. Down on the platform, she saw her own reflection in the glass, then a stranger's camera behind it. When she spun around, the platform was empty. The train roared in, bright against the dark tunnel, and Evelyn stepped aboard feeling as if her predictable life had shifted 1 inch off its track. Above ground, Cole stood in the snow and watched the city as though it had changed shape. By morning, Evelyn tried to file the dinner under strange and move on. Strange was safer than important, but Cole did not fit into any neat category. She remembered the sedan, the flash of the camera, the way he had kept his body between her and the street without touching her. For 3 days, he did not call. His silence should have relieved her. Instead, it annoyed her so much she hated herself for noticing. On the 4th night, her phone buzzed. Evelyn answered only to accuse him of being either rude or strategic. Cole said he had been proving to himself he could resist chasing her. She told him that sounded like something a dangerous man would say, right before becoming worse. He admitted self-awareness was useful in moderation. Against her will. She smiled. He asked for a normal walk along the public lakefront. No private dining room. No car, no lada. Evelyn leaned back and asked whether armed security would be hiding in the trees. Cole offered to place them farther away. She said no guards. A heavy silence followed. For the first time, she heard him struggle with giving up control. Cole agreed to come alone. Evelyn knew she should cancel. Instead, she chose Saturday. The weekend arrived with bitter wind and a hard blue sky. She found him by the lake, still as a monument while waves broke white against the concrete. Joggers passed. Bicycles rattled by. Cole looked like the only person not touched by ordinary time. Evelyn stepped beside him and said he looked ready to hear a confession. His mouth softened. She admitted she had almost stayed home. He said he was glad she had not. They began walking. He matched her pace without crowding her. For almost 10 minutes. The quiet felt easy. Then Evelyn noticed the same black SUV twice in the reflection of a shop window. Lake Michigan stretched gray and restless beside them. Evelyn stopped near a railing and looked back. The SUV slowed half a block away. Cole's face did not change, which told her everything. She asked where his security was. He admitted they were 3 blocks away. Evelyn stared at him. He had promised to come alone. Cole said 3 blocks was close to alone. She crossed her arms and told him that was the kind of sentence only a rich criminal could say with confidence. His jaw tightened. He was not used to leaving anyone unprotected. Evelyn snapped that she was not a stolen painting. Cole asked if she thought he wanted to own her. The question landed hard because part of him feared the answer. Cole stood in the cold air, stripped of charm for once. He did not defend himself with arrogance. He looked tired, as if every promise cost him more than she understood. Evelyn let out a breath and allowed exactly 3 blocks, no closer. A faint smile touched his mouth as he tried to bargain for 5. She kept walking. He followed. The tension eased only when he began talking about frozen winters, before his father's world swallowed his childhood. Evelyn answered with her own small wound. Her sister had always been fireworks, while she had been the utility bill, necessary and ignored. Cole did not laugh. He understood the cruelty of being needed but unseen. By the time they turned back, neither of them was quite a stranger anymore. Evelyn protected her quiet routine, but Cole kept finding careful ways into it. He learned the dusty bookstore where she hid on Sundays, the bakery that saved the good cookies. The taco truck she swore was better than any restaurant he owned. One freezing evening, snow melting from both their coats, she watched him study a street taco like it might explode. She teased him about private chefs and cold intimidation. He looked at her and said silence usually did the work. Then he tasted the taco and looked genuinely betrayed by how good it was. Evelyn warned him not to buy the truck. He promised nothing, for a moment. The dangerous legend looked defeated by cilantro and hot sauce. Cole Mercer was a contradiction Evelyn could not solve. He hated mushrooms, over-tipped waiters, remembered throwaway comments, and listened as if every word mattered. Yet danger lived in him like an old injury. He scanned windows, chose seats facing exits, and sometimes went silent in a way that made the air change. Evelyn felt the full weight of that reality the night he brought her to his penthouse. In the marble lobby, she hesitated. Cole noticed at once and offered to leave. She said she was not afraid of the elevator. She was afraid of what stepping into his private world might do to hers. He held the doors open and said it would mean only what she decided it meant. The elevator rose in smooth silence while the city dropped beneath them. Cole stood beside her without touching. His penthouse was exactly as intimidating as she expected. Dark wood, enormous windows, and a skyline spread out like property. But then he led her past the steel and glass to a heavy door warmed by hidden light. A greenhouse opened beyond it, filled with lemon trees. Climbing roses and tomato vines tied gently with cloth. Rain streaked the glass overhead. Evelyn stopped in the doorway, stunned. This was not a trophy room. It was work, soil under the nails, careful pruning, small lives that could not be commanded into surviving. The room smelled of damp earth and citrus, and somehow that made Cole more dangerous, not less. A piece of summer hung above a frozen city, tended by a man whose name made people lower their voices. Evelyn touched a lemon and asked why he kept this place. Cole rolled up his sleeves. The plants did not care who his father had been, he said. They lived if he worked and died if he failed. No flattery, no fear, just consequence. Sitting under the leaves, he finally spoke about his father. A kingpin who taught him to read fear before contracts. A man who believed mercy was weakness and love was a door enemies could use. Cole had inherited blood, paperwork, and 1,000 men waiting for him to become the same monster. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When Cole finished, his knuckles were pale around the pruning shears. He said he had spent half his life learning to become his father, and the other half trying not to. Evelyn asked which half was winning. He looked at the wet glass and said it depended on the day. She did not reach for him. Comfort would have given him somewhere to hide. Instead, she asked for honesty. Cole warned her his world was uglier than any rumor she had heard. Evelyn said pretending would be worse. On the way out, his fingers brushed hers, light enough to ask permission without a word. She let them stay. Neither of them noticed the camera flash from the building across the street. By dawn, the photo was everywhere. Evelyn leaving Cole Mercer's building, her hair loose, his hand near the small of her back. The headline called her a secret lover, then a mobster's accountant, then worse. Her phone filled with messages before she finished her coffee. The real damage waited at work. Graham shut her in his office, pinching the bridge of his nose as though she had personally collapsed the stock market. The firm could not afford reputational complications, he said. Evelyn told him her work had not changed overnight. Graham said perception mattered. She understood then that years of competence could be erased by one photograph if the wrong man stood beside her in it. Back at her desk, the spreadsheets blurred while whispers moved through the office like insects. Evelyn made it to the restroom before her breathing broke. She was furious at the photographers, at Graham, at every coworker pretending not to enjoy the show. Mostly she hated how badly she wanted to call Cole. She refused to become the woman rescued by a man everyone feared. Then her phone buzzed. It was him, hearing her silence. Cole immediately offered to make the photos disappear. Evelyn stopped him. He could not erase her problems like bad press. He apologized for failing to protect her. She wiped her eyes and told the most dangerous man in Chicago that not every ugly thing in the world was his to control. Cole went quiet. That worried her more than anger. When he suggested guards, Evelyn asked for one day of peace. He gave her something else instead. Grilled cheese and tomato soup left outside her door. No driver. No speech. No demand. Just a message that said, "Eat before deciding to hate me." She hated that it made her smile. 3 nights later, a charity auction threatened to turn her into fresh gossip. Evelyn almost stayed home. Then pride, stubborn and useful, got her into a simple black dress. She walked into the glittering room, knowing everyone would look. When Cole saw her, his face changed, not with triumph, but with understanding. He knew exactly what it cost her to step into the light. Cole called her beautiful quietly, as if the word belonged only to her. Evelyn deflected with a joke about the dress being financially irresponsible. He seemed to understand that humor was her shield. The auction hall glittered with diamonds, old money, and polite judgment. Cole kept his hand inches from her back, close enough to offer support, far enough to let her choose. Then Blair Whittam entered. Ivory dress, diamonds, perfect posture. A woman who looked like she had never run for a train in her life. She greeted Cole with chilly familiarity and reduced Evelyn to the accountant. Evelyn did not shrink. She smiled and said Blair made the word sound like a disease. Blair's polite smile sharpened. She leaned close and delivered the warning without raising her voice. Men like Cole did not get to love quietly. Anyone he touched became a target. His enemies would not care whether Evelyn was innocent. They would only care that he looked at her. Love in Cole's world was leverage. The word stayed with Evelyn long after the auction ended. Hours later, Cole walked her home through wet streets. Her apartment door waited at the end of the hallway. Something felt wrong before she touched it. The deadbolt turned too easily. Cole moved in front of her, and the man from diners and greenhouses vanished. In his place stood someone built for violence. Cole ordered her back, one hand sliding under his coat. The apartment was dark and suffocating. Nothing had been stolen. That made it worse. On the windowsill lay her basil plant, severed at the stem. Its leaves scattered like a warning. Beside it sat a crisp white card. Pretty things die near Mercer. Evelyn's knees weakened. Then her cat crept from under the sofa, alive and furious, and she nearly cried with relief. Within minutes, Cole's men arrived. They moved through her rooms with silent efficiency, checking closets, windows, vents, corners. They were not police. They were ghosts from a war she had never agreed to join. Her home, the one place that had belonged only to her, no longer felt untouched. Cole gave the order as if it had already been decided. She was coming with him. Evelyn heard protection. She also heard a cage door closing. She refused. Her voice shook. But the words did not. He could not take her home away, because his enemies had frightened him. He could not love her like evidence locked in a drawer. The accusation hit hard enough to crack his composure. Cole stared at the ruined plant and admitted he did not know how to love someone without preparing for their funeral. That was the truth beneath all his control. He was terrified. But terror with money and armed men could become a prison if no one stopped it. Evelyn told him he had to learn a better way to care for her. She would accept help, not ownership. Cole went silent, forced to swallow the difference. At last, he agreed to leave 2 guards downstairs, outside the building, not inside her life. Evelyn wanted to refuse even that, but the broken lock, the dead plant, and her trembling cat pulled her back to reality. She accepted the perimeter. His men fixed the door and disappeared. Only Cole remained, staring at the severed basil as if it were a body. He apologized. Evelyn believed him. That did not repair the damage. When he left, his shoulders looked heavier than she had ever seen them. Alone, Evelyn stood in a silence that no longer felt safe. She looked through the curtains and saw Cole's men waiting by the curb. Farther down the street, in the shadow beyond a street lamp, another car sat still. A red flash blinked once from its windshield. Evelyn stumbled back. In the kitchen, the white card waited under the hard light. Pretty things die near Mercer. Fear crawled up her throat. Then it changed shape. It became anger. She turned on every light in the apartment and laid the card beside her laptop. If someone wanted her frightened and blind, they had chosen the wrong woman. She did not sleep. She started making a list. At 6:15, the city woke beneath her window as if nothing had happened. People walked dogs, bought coffee, cursed at traffic. Normal life kept moving, and that almost made her angrier. Cole called just after dawn. They traded tired jokes about not sleeping before the fight returned. He wanted her hidden somewhere safe. Evelyn said she was going to work. She had rent, a career, clients, and a life that did not pause because his enemies had discovered her name. When Cole offered to cover her bills, the softness in his voice made the insult sting more. She told him financial rescue still had a lock on it if she had to ask permission to live. Staring at the ruined basil, Evelyn finally named the problem. Cole could buy safety, and that was exactly why she did not trust it. While he was trying to keep her alive, she was trying to remain herself. Cole answered with cold facts. The intruder had picked the lock cleanly, left no prints, and touched nothing except the plant. A professional warning. He knew how to speak to the part of her mind that respected evidence. They negotiated a tense truce. 1 guard, out of sight. No following her between cubicles like a hostage. When she reached the office, the gray carpet and buzzing lights looked fake, as if danger had learned how to wait under fluorescent bulbs. By the copy machine, Tessa asked if she was all right. Evelyn hid behind sarcasm, but Tessa saw through it immediately. She noticed the rigid shoulders, the two steady hands, the face of a woman holding herself together by force. Then Graham barked her name. In his dim office, he stood with his arms crossed, wearing the expression weak men use when pretending to be decisive. He ordered her to sit. Evelyn stayed standing. He called the leaked photo a major crisis. She looked him in the eye and corrected him. He had anxiety, not a crisis. For once, Graham had no quick answer. That small silence felt better than it should have. Graham dressed the betrayal as concern. Clients were worried, he said. The partners had discussed exposure. Her largest accounts would be reassigned until things calmed down. Evelyn knew what temporary meant in corporate language. It meant gone, unless she smiled while being erased. She opened her mouth, then saw her system access vanish on the screen behind him. Account by account, door by door. The humiliation burned clean through her exhaustion. These were messes she had fixed, numbers she had untangled, mistakes she had caught before anyone else noticed. Now they were taking her work and calling it caution. Graham said it was not personal. Evelyn said people only said that when they wanted permission to be cowardly. Instead of crumbling, Evelyn turned to the only language that had never lied to her, data, under Tessa's worried stare. She began documenting everything. Dates, times, the dark sedan, the broken lock, the card, Graham's words, the removed accounts. Numbers did not panic. They recorded. Later, Ruth called, begging her to come back to Oak Park, where the house smelled of lemon cleaner and old fear. Evelyn leaned against the cold concrete stairwell and refused. She loved her mother, but she could not retreat into a smaller version of herself just because the world had become loud. The danger was real. So was her life. She would not abandon one to survive the other. That moment in the stairwell changed something. Evelyn told her mother she was tired of everyone deciding what she should fear. Ruth went quiet, wounded but listening. Later, Evelyn met Madison at a dim restaurant where secrets seemed to belong on the menu. Madison's polished face cracked the moment she saw Evelyn's exhaustion. They spoke about the rumors, the break-in, the way society could reduce a woman's career to the man photographed beside her. Madison pushed a glass of water toward her and asked why she kept letting Cole close. Evelyn could have said danger, desire, stupidity, curiosity. Instead, she answered the truth. He listened. He saw her before she had to perform. Madison looked down at her diamond ring. For once, she did not look polished. She looked trapped. She admitted her engagement felt less like love than a merger agreement with better flowers. Evelyn saw the suffocating woman beneath the flawless surface. Madison said power always charged someone, even when it arrived wrapped in privilege. Then she warned Evelyn again. Being seen by Cole Mercer was not the same as being safe with him. Evelyn knew that. She also knew how dangerous it was to be invisible for too long. When someone finally looked at you like a whole person, walking away from that gaze could feel like stepping back into a room with no air. Across town, Cole Mercer stood in the glass conference room of his empire, surrounded by men who smelled blood before news broke. Frank Malloy, an old wolf with silver hair and dead eyes, demanded retaliation for the break-in at Evelyn's apartment, hit Roar's warehouses, burn his trucks. Remind the city whose name still mattered. Cole stood at the head of the table and said no. Silas Roar wanted him violent. That was the point. Frank sneered that restraint made men weak. Cole looked at him, and the room cooled. His father had believed the same thing. Cole was trying to prove in front of men, who missed the old ways, that strength did not always arrive with a body count. The boardroom carried the weight of Mercer history. Men had taken orders there that never appeared in any official file. Frank pushed harder, warning that Silas Roar would rot their clean businesses from the inside. To the old guard, Evelyn was leverage, nothing more. But when Cole gripped the leather chair, every man at the table remembered the monster still sleeping beneath his skin. He told Frank to pray he never woke that man again. Miles away, Evelyn stood in a grocery store comparing oats with the cheaper brand, desperate for ordinary choices. She did not know Roar's name yet. She did not know his money had already moved through companies she had once audited. But the trap was already closing. There was bravery in buying groceries, while someone tried to turn your life into a threat. Evelyn stood in the frozen food aisle, reading prices as if oatmeal could anchor the world. Then she spotted Cole's man reflected in the glass door. Tall, dark coat, pretending badly to compare peas. The illusion of control snapped. She left her basket and walked out into the biting wind. Later, Cole waited in her dim hallway. And at least he did not lie. He admitted he had sent the shadow. His honesty was infuriating, because it was cleaner than the excuses everyone else gave her. Evelyn unlocked the door but left it half open. That was the only invitation he was getting. Inside, every object in her apartment seemed aware of him. Evelyn called out his broken promises and refused to let him rename surveillance as care. Cole insisted Silas Rohr was not a man who stopped at warnings. Evelyn heard the fear beneath the control. He was building a cage and calling it a shield. She told him the difference mattered. Locking someone away did not protect love. It protected the person too frightened to trust it. Cole's hands clenched, then opened. He looked toward the ruined basil on the counter. Evelyn delivered the truth quietly. His fear, not his strength, was what made him dangerous. The words struck him harder than shouting would have. Cole turned away, trapped between the woman in front of him and the lessons buried by his father. In his world, love was weakness. Weakness got used. Used things got destroyed. Evelyn stepped closer and told him to stop looking at her like a liability with a pulse. Partnership was not forcing armor onto someone who never asked for it. It was standing close enough to help, without taking away their ground. They negotiated like exhausted diplomats. One guard outside. No more shadows in stores, train stations, or office lobbies. No decisions about her life made without her. When Cole finally left, Evelyn did not watch him go. She opened her laptop. If Rohr wanted to scare her, she would answer in numbers. Only hours earlier, Graham had put her on paid leave, as if a paycheck could replace purpose. He had also made a mistake. Her computer still held cached copies from the Mercer waterfront project. Evelyn opened them looking for something to steady her mind, at first. The ledgers looked boring, which was exactly how good lies preferred to dress. Then a rhythm appeared, $9,800. $9,750. $9,900. Again and again, each payment just below the $10,000 reporting threshold. Honest mistakes were messy. These were careful. Evelyn sat straighter. Someone was not hiding money from Cole's company. Someone was hiding dirty money inside it. Evelyn dug through file after file. The same quiet lies appeared across fake vendors with polished websites, empty mailboxes, and invoices written by someone who thought accountants only checked totals. Each transaction looked harmless alone. Together they pulsed like a signal. She followed property records, shell companies, freight charges, campaign donations. By midnight, her kitchen table had become a war room of yellow highlighters, cold coffee, and her cat stepping on evidence. Then the truth clicked into place. Cole was not laundering money through the waterfront project. Silas Rohr was poisoning Cole's clean contracts, building a federal cage around him one neat invoice at a time. And Evelyn had the map. At 2 a.m, the ghost had a name and a pattern. Silas Rohr was not just threatening doors and plants. He had crawled into the books. Evelyn's hand hovered over her phone. She almost called Cole, then she stopped. If she handed him everything from her kitchen, he would lock her behind steel by sunrise. She chose a different route. By 8:30, sleepless and furious, she marched into Mercer Holdings with a folder thick enough to bruise someone. The guards moved to block her. Evelyn did not slow down. She told them she had found Rohr in the books. Both men froze. One reached for his earpiece. Evelyn stepped into the elevator before anyone could decide she was still harmless. The steel elevator opened onto the executive floor like a curtain rising on a fight. Evelyn brushed past another guard and pushed into the conference room. Cole sat with frank lawyers and men whose faces had learned not to reveal fear. Every voice stopped. Cole searched her exhausted face, then the folder in her hand. He assumed she had come because of another physical threat. That was the mistake everyone kept making. Evelyn walked to the mahogany table and slammed the folder down. Highlighted pages slid across the polished wood. She looked at the most dangerous men in Chicago and told them the rot was already inside their walls. For once, nobody interrupted. Frank reached for the papers. Evelyn slapped her palm over them before he touched a single page. Her hand shook, but her voice did not. She was done being treated like a fragile liability. Cole held her gaze, and something in his face changed. He saw the difference between protecting her and underestimating her. He pulled out a chair. She refused it. If she sat down now, exhaustion might win. Standing, she demanded tape for the glass wall, 3 legal pads, and coffee strong enough to frighten witnesses. A young lawyer looked offended. Evelyn snapped that he could be offended while moving. Frank stared at her for one long second, then laughed under his breath. Cole returned with tape, pads, and coffee, then quietly handed the room to Evelyn. She began pressing vendor forms, tax filings, and property records against the glass wall. The men watched in tense silence. They knew guns, leverage, and threats whispered in private rooms. This was a different battlefield. Evelyn tapped the first page. Fake freight charge. $9,800. Just low enough to stay invisible. She tapped the next. Same structure. Different vendor. Then another. The numbers shifted slightly, trying to pretend they did not know one another. Cole stood near the corner, arms crossed, watching her turn the glass into a crime scene built from paper. Evelyn held Frank's hard stare and continued. 9,750 on Tuesday, 9,900 on Thursday. 8 fake vendors, 3 mailing addresses. 1 formatting error repeated across the tax forms. Dominic, one of Cole's lawyers, asked what error. Evelyn pointed. 1 extra space before the city name. People could forge signatures and invent companies, but habit survived copy and paste. Frank leaned closer despite himself. Even he was listening now. Cole's eyes had gone still but not cold. He looked almost mesmerized. Evelyn did not let herself enjoy it. She was too tired and too angry. Roar had been counting on violent men missing small details. That was his first real mistake. The dirty money never touched Mercer accounts directly. Evelyn explained. It bled through desperate subcontractors, then returned as tainted invoices. If federal agents arrived, the rot would look like sloppy work by low-level employees. Plausible. Boring, damning. The oldest lawyer slowly removed his glasses. Frank cursed, his face darkening as he understood. Silas Roar had buried radioactive financial waste inside Cole's clean project. Evelyn kept going because if she stopped, her knees might give out. She traced the shell companies to a city inspector named Calvin Price, then to a watchdog group already preparing public statements. The trap was not coming. It had been built for months. All it needed now was for Cole to panic. Cole's face changed at Calvin Price's name. The inspector was due back next week. Keene, the senior attorney, warned that one bot inspector could freeze the entire waterfront project. Evelyn slid a donation record forward. Roar's money had reached the watchdog group through 2 clean-looking nonprofits. The press would get leaked files. The inspector would create the official panic, and nervous lenders would run. Frank shoved back his chair and demanded they strike first. Burn Roar's warehouses before he burned theirs. Evelyn turned on him. That was exactly what Roar wanted. Frank's eyes narrowed. He said she knew numbers. He knew violent men. Evelyn said the violent men were the bait. The room went dead quiet. Evelyn circled 3 clusters on the glass and mapped Roar's real plan. Financial poison first. Regulatory pressure second. Then the story. Cole Mercer, son of a crime lord, caught laundering dirty money while hiding a frightened woman in his bed. If Cole answered with fire, Roar would get proof that the old Mercer monster was still alive. Frank sneered that Cole's father would have drowned the problem in blood before breakfast. Cole's voice went flat. His father had spent a lifetime making enemies and calling it respect. Cole would not spend the rest of his own cleaning up the same blood. No one moved. Even Frank looked away first. Keene stepped carefully into the silence. If Evelyn's math held, they had a legal path out. But courtrooms needed proof, not instincts. Cole moved to the glass and asked her to break down Roar's timeline. Evelyn laid it out cleanly. Stage 1. Contaminate the subcontractors. Stage 2. Use Calvin Price to make the project look dirty. Stage 3. Leak doctored files mixed with facts. The best lies did not invent everything. They kept enough truth to make denial look desperate. Cole's eyes darkened as he understood why Evelyn's apartment had been hit. Roar had not only wanted to scare her, he had wanted to give the press a helpless woman to point at. Evelyn pulled out a clean sheet and wrote the counterattack in thick black marker. Do not hide the ledgers. Surrender the clean ones first. Voluntary corporate disclosure before Roar's leak. Independent audit before the press could frame it. Freeze every subcontractor tied to the repeated payments. Put the truth into federal hands before Roar could turn it into theater. Frank looked at her as if she had suggested walking unarmed into a knife fight. Evelyn said the retaliation had to be painfully boring. Let Roar throw sparks at a room already full of lawyers and auditors. Cole read the list once. Then again. He did not smile, but his shoulders lowered by half an inch. Frank muttered that boring terrified criminals because it gave them nothing to hit. Dominic asked what to do with Calvin Price. Cole's first instinct was to keep him away from the site. Evelyn said no. Welcome him in. Make the project spotless. Bring in independent engineers. Put cameras on every corner. Let Price file a false violation while every inch of the site was clean and recorded. Then attach his bribery trail to his own report. His weapon would become his noose. The room began to shift. Men who had entered ready for blood were now following an accountant through a war plan built from paperwork. Cole looked at Evelyn as if she had just moved the city under his feet. Strategy could move fast, but it could not stop a bullet. That truth cooled the room. Cole demanded that Evelyn be sent out of the city until the filings were complete. She planted herself where she stood. He reminded her she was a target. She said she knew. Her voice was quiet, not brave enough to be comfortable, but steady enough to matter. She was terrified. She was also right. Cole swore he would never use her as bait. Evelyn saw the boy raised in war. Still haunted by the thought of becoming his father. He loved her so much he was ready to turn protection into prison. She could not let him. Evelyn told Cole to listen to her. Not because he cared about her, but because she was very good at what she did. That landed harder than any plea. For a man raised inside hierarchy, respect meant surrendering control. Love was easier. Love could still be possessive if fear wore a tender voice. Cole looked at the glass wall, then back at her. At last he nodded. Evelyn gave her demands. Full access to the syndicate files. Lawyers on standby. Security that informed her instead of managed her. And enough coffee to keep her from committing homicide. Frank made a sound that might have been approval. For the first time. The room had a plan that did not smell like blood. The Chicago sky bruised from hard glare into storm gray, while Evelyn worked inside Mercer's glass fortress. She traced shell companies, flagged warehouses, and rewrote the story Roar had prepared for them. By midnight, disclosures were drafted, corrupt vendors isolated, and 3 lawyers looked afraid of her highlighter. Then exhaustion hit all at once. Evelyn swayed. Cole caught her by the elbow, firm but careful. As if remembering every argument they had ever had about control. He told her to eat. She accused him of being bossy. He said that was fair. When the food arrived, it was not expensive catering. It was soup and cookies from the tiny bakery she loved, and had mentioned only once. The detail undid her more than any grand gesture could have. Cole had sent a guard to a small bakery, because he remembered she liked their cookies when she was tired. He had been listening. Before she could say anything too honest. The conference room doors opened. Blair Whittam stepped inside, perfect in a dark coat and leather gloves. She looked like a woman who could make chaos stand in line. Cole briefed her with cold precision. Evelyn watched as Blair's eyes moved over the glass wall, the records, the danger, and finally her. Blair removed her gloves slowly. Finger by finger, the room tightened. This was not a social call. This was a woman preparing to turn public opinion into a weapon. Blair said Roar would not only attack the books, he would attack the image. Evelyn would be painted as frightened, seduced, trapped, or bought. Anything except competent. There was a charity meeting the next day, packed with donors and hungry press. If Evelyn walked in calm and visible beside Cole, Roar's victim story would crack before it fully formed. Cole rejected it instantly. He would not parade her in front of wolves. Evelyn held his gaze. He did not get to decide that alone. Blair watched them with cool interest. Then she said the cameras were coming whether Evelyn hid or not. The only choice was whether Evelyn entered the story standing up or let Roar place her on her knees. Cole turned away and rubbed the back of his neck. The command had left his voice. Only fear remained. He hated cameras pointed at Evelyn like weapons. Evelyn stepped closer and lowered her voice. He had said he wanted out of his father's shadow. He could not win that fight in private and then be shocked when the public believed old rumors. She promised to stand near him, not behind him. She would not be hidden like something breakable. Cole closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them with visible effort. He agreed, but on shared terms. Security would be honest. Exits mapped. No surprises. Evelyn nodded. For once, protection sounded less like a cage and more like a partnership. Wet snow fell through the harsh glare of camera lights behind velvet ropes. Inside the car, Evelyn sat still, pulse hammering in her throat. Cole sat beside her, silent, palm open on the seat between them. She placed her hand in his fingers closed around it, warm and careful. He murmured that she did not have to do this. They both knew she did. When the door opened, the cold hit her like a slap. Reporters shouted at once. Cameras flashed so bright the world broke into pieces of white. The quiet accountant from the blurry photo was gone. Evelyn stepped onto the curb beside Cole Mercer and forced her knees not to bend. Evelyn kept her chin level as she walked. The camera flashes felt hungry, searching for fear. A reporter shouted, asking if she was afraid of being tied to a criminal enterprise. Beside her, Cole went still. His grip tightened, then slowly loosened. He was choosing not to answer for her. Evelyn turned toward the voice. She said she was an accountant, and if she were running a syndicate, she would certainly recommend better bookkeeping. The crowd laughed, startled out of its bloodlust. Then she added that facts mattered, and facts were coming. The laughter faded into a different kind of attention. Inside the lobby, she exhaled shakily. Cole looked at her as if she had just stopped a bullet with a sentence. The meeting became a parade of forced handshakes, careful smiles, and people pretending they had not already judged her. Evelyn did not fold. Cole moved beside her without pulling her into his shadow. Near midnight, Keene gave a quiet signal. Federal intake was ready. The first disclosure package had been accepted. They slipped out into freezing rain and found the street wrong. Their car was gone. The curb stood empty. Cole sensed the trap before Evelyn saw it. His body dropped into stillness. "Stay close," he whispered. A black sedan rolled from the shadows without headlights. Another vehicle moved behind them. Blocking the street, men stepped out, rain sliding off their coats like oil. The world narrowed to engines. Rain and the hard line of Cole's hand around her wrist. Armed men blocked the alley mouth. One stranger lifted a phone, showing a live video feed of Evelyn's apartment building. "Mr. Rohr says everyone can be reached," he said. Evelyn felt Cole ignite beside her. The violence in his blood woke so fast it frightened even her. Frank shouted a warning, but Cole lunged. Evelyn caught his hand with both of hers. She could not overpower him. She did not try. She anchored him. "Not like your father," she whispered. The words cut through the rain. Cole stared at her, breathing hard. Caught between the man he had been trained to become and the man he wanted to choose. Every man in the alley froze. Then Cole smiled, controlled and terrifying. He told the messenger to give Rohr a message. The woman counting receipts had found his banks. The smirk vanished from the man's face. Cole let them leave. No broken bones, no bodies. Just a threat delivered through information, which made it worse. When the taillights disappeared, Evelyn's knees buckled. Cole caught her at once. She admitted she was terrified. He opened his arms, and she stepped into them, feeling the tremors he had trapped inside his own body. By dawn, their legal trap snapped shut. Motions were filed. Shadow accounts froze, and men who had laughed at paperwork stopped laughing. The dominoes fell fast. Corrupt inspectors were suspended. Banks locked accounts tied to Rohr's network. Reporters called it financial sabotage and suddenly wanted Evelyn's expert opinion. Victory felt less like triumph than exhaustion with better lighting. Cole stood beside her, quiet and watchful. Then Frank walked in with fresh bad news. Silas Rohr wanted to sit down at the Bellwether Club, a place famous for hidden exits and old crimes under polished floors. Evelyn insisted on going. Cole refused before she finished. But the iron had gone out of his voice. She said she would not sit in the room. but she would not cower somewhere safe, while dangerous men discussed the price of her life. Evelyn pressed the point until even Frank, to Cole's obvious disgust, agreed with her. She would wait nearby with federal agents in full security, not hidden, not bait present. They arrived at the Bellwether Club under a black sky. The building overlooked the river, like it had been watching secrets drown for a century. Evelyn was taken to a secure room down the hall. Cole walked alone into the dining room to face Silas Rohr. The old boss wore cruelty as comfortably as his tailored suit. He smirked at Cole and called him the prince who wanted to be a banker. Cole refused the chair. He let the silence answer first. Rohr mocked the idea that a woman with spreadsheets had wounded him. Cole said it was only embarrassing if Rohr had something to hide. Between them sat evidence heavy with frozen accounts, bribed inspectors, and men whose loyalty had dissolved when the money stopped moving. Rohr leaned back, smiling with rotten confidence. "Your father would be ashamed," he said. Cole sat down then, untouched by the old ghost. "My father is dead," he answered. Rohr warned that paper had never stopped bullets. Cole said paper now traveled faster than bodies. It reached federal desks before Rohr's men could load a gun. Frank dropped the banking confirmation on the table. Rohr's smile thinned into something close to grief. Cole told Rohr to walk away. If he did not, Evelyn would testify to everything she found, and the government would bury him until his name meant conspiracy, fraud, and failure. Rohr looked toward the heavy door, sensing her presence beyond it. Then he stood, venom rising. Did Cole think love had made him stronger? Cole rose too. "No," he said. Love had only made him tired of being weak in the same old way. Rohr spat that the streets still feared Cole's father. Cole looked at him without flinching. Then the streets could learn a new name. Rohr walked out. No gunfire. No shattered glass. Only the click of a door and an empire beginning to die. When Cole entered the secure room, Evelyn stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. The federal agent suddenly found the opposite wall interesting. She asked if it was done. Cole said not done, but turned. Frank leaned in the doorway, looking older than he had an hour before. "Your father would have burned the city for less," he muttered. Cole kept his eyes on Evelyn. That was why his father had never owned anything worth keeping. Outside, the skyline glittered over the river. Evelyn stepped close and whispered that he had finally made a choice. Cole shook his head. He had been making it every minute, he said. That was the hard part. Cole took Evelyn's hand in front of Frank, the agents, and the city without apology. She was no longer the woman accidentally dragged beside a dangerous man. She was the reason danger had been forced to answer to evidence. Chicago did not clean itself overnight. Men still lied. Money still moved in shadows. But inside Mercer Holdings, the old rules began to crack. Lawyers filled the building. Federal agents asked polite questions with sharp teeth. Shadow accounts stayed frozen. Subcontractors turned on one another. For 3 weeks, Cole barely slept. Evelyn watched him dismantle pieces of his inheritance with a steadiness that looked almost painful. Breaking a cycle was not one heroic act. It was 1,000 signatures after midnight. Silas Rohr did not vanish. Men like him rarely did. But his money dried up. Allies stopped answering, and the machine around him slowed until every gear sounded strained. Cole should have looked relieved. Instead, he grew quieter. One snowy evening, Evelyn found him in the greenhouse, standing before a lemon tree, with his sleeves rolled up and his face hollow. She stepped inside, letting the damp earth replace the sterile smell of legal offices. "You missed dinner," she said. He apologized, but the smile never reached his eyes. The papers were signed. Routes closed. Property surrendered. Hundreds of millions tied to his father's dirty empire had been cut away. And the wound was still bleeding. High above the restless city, the greenhouse felt like the only honest place left. Cole set down the pruning shears and said his father had poisoned the family soil. He had thought cleaning it meant trimming branches. Now he understood the roots had to burn. Evelyn touched a green leaf and asked if he regretted it. Cole looked at the dark glass overhead. He said regret was not the right word. Grief was closer. He was mourning a future he had once imagined. One where he could keep the good parts and cut away the rot cleanly. Evelyn did not pretend it was simple. Old power did not leave politely. It tore out floorboards on the way. Evelyn told him grief did not mean he had chosen wrong. Cole's voice roughened. His father would have called this weakness. Evelyn looked around the warm living room and said his father no longer owned it. The next morning, Cole sat across a cold conference table and signed away freight routes, crooked shell companies, and properties built on fear. Page by page, the empire shrank. Frank stood behind him, silent for once. The hardest signature came last. A waterfront property his mother had loved before his father turned it into a hiding place for dirty money. Cole's pen hovered. Then he signed. A dark era ended not with gunfire, but with ink. Frank remembered quietly that Cole's mother used to like the seagulls there. Cole stared at the page as if it had become a grave marker. Then he closed the folder. Later, Frank warned him the old guard would not accept the surrendered wealth. Men who had fed on fear for decades would come demanding blood. Cole said they could stand in line behind the ghosts. Frank asked if he truly meant to live clean. Cole did not give a polished answer. He said he meant to live awake. That was enough. Frank nodded slowly, almost proud and almost afraid. Evelyn saw then that leaving violence behind did not make Cole harmless. It made him responsible for every choice he made next. Peace did not arrive gently. The press kept chewing on Evelyn's name, calling her either Cole's conscience, his weakness, or a schemer who had climbed into power through his bed. One morning, overwhelmed, she threw her phone onto the couch hard enough to send Milo, the neighbor's dog she was watching, skittering into the hallway. Then Graham Voss called. Public opinion had shifted. Suddenly the firm wanted her back. He sat behind his pristine glass desk, speaking in careful phrases about complicated positions and temporary measures. Evelyn listened until he finished. Then she said she had been in a complicated position. He had been in an office. The difference seemed to trouble him. Graham wanted her back on major accounts, now that the scandal had turned into good publicity. He said the partners valued resilience. Evelyn almost laughed. They valued profit wearing a better tie. She looked out at the bullpen where she had spent years, making herself useful enough to be ignored, and understood something cleanly. She no longer wanted approval from a place that only respected her when embarrassment became advantage. So she resigned. Graham scoffed and called her emotional. Evelyn said she had never made a single emotional decision in that building, though she was considering starting now. She walked out with one cardboard box, a stolen stapler Tessa insisted was severance, and the strange fear of freedom opening beneath her feet. Evelyn's new office in Ravenswood was not impressive, the floorboards complained. The radiator rattled like something trapped in the wall. Her sign, Harper Forensic Accounting, was heavy paper taped to the glass, because she refused to spend real money before the first invoice cleared. The room held a rented desk, 2 chairs, a cheap coffee maker, and sunlight that made the place feel like hers. Then the door opened. Cole walked in carrying a large lemon tree in a ceramic pot. Evelyn immediately warned him not to buy her furniture, flooring, plumbing, or the building. Cole said a plant did not legally qualify. She narrowed her eyes and said that depended on the tax code. Cole looked around at the bare walls and the sputtering coffee maker. He set the tree by the window and said things should grow there. The simplicity of it disarmed her. Evelyn looked away before he could see too much. She accused him of weaponizing sincerity. Then she nudged the pot 1 inch to the left, reclaiming control in the only way available. The tree could stay, she said, but she was naming it Meatloaf. From there, the agency grew in small, stubborn ways. A baker suspected theft. A non-profit had missing funds. A hardware store was bleeding inventory. None of the cases made headlines. They mattered anyway. Each frightened client left with answers. And Evelyn remembered why she loved the work. The cases were tiny compared with the corporate empires she used to audit, but the people sitting across from her desk did not need empires saved. They needed rent money found, a thief named, a family business kept alive. Evelyn turned panic into patterns and patterns into proof. Cole visited rarely and always asked first. That mattered more than flowers. Some late nights, he sat on the floor with his own files, while she worked through missing deposits. One evening, he said she looked different in that room. What he meant was that she looked like herself. The risk was hers. The work was hers. When she admitted she was still afraid, he did not try to erase it. He only stayed. Months passed slowly. The old syndicate fractured under investigation, while Cole fought to keep his legitimate businesses alive in daylight. Frank hovered nearby, complaining about everything, while leaving anonymous coffees on Evelyn's desk like a gruff, armed fairy godmother. Then the last threat arrived in the simplest way. A brown envelope pushed beneath her office door after closing. Inside was a photograph of the lemon tree, taken through the window, and a single line. Gardens burn. Evelyn did not scream. She called Cole. Then the police contact Blair had given her. And finally Frank. When Cole arrived, fear was already on his face. Evelyn met him at the door and said he was not going to handle this alone. Cole wanted to move her out within the hour. Evelyn saw the old panic rising in him, the part that reached for walls, guards, and orders. She took the photograph from his hand and laid it on her desk beside invoices from a hardware store case. Same paper stock, same cheap ink. Frank traced it to one of the old Mercer men, a bitter lieutenant named Vanko, who had lost money when Cole surrendered the freight routes. By midnight, the police were waiting outside Vanko's storage unit, and Cole was forced to stand across the street with Evelyn instead of breaking down the door himself. When the arrest came quietly, no one cheered. Cole only exhaled, as if another ghost had finally been given a name. After that, Ruth arrived with a warm casserole, treating entrepreneurship and death threats as if both required feeding the entire neighborhood. Then she saw Evelyn's name on the office door and stopped. Her hand touched the glass. Her eyes filled. She whispered that Evelyn's father would have been proud. Evelyn did not know what to say. For years, she had confused being quiet with being safe. Now her name was on a door, and her mother was crying because she had finally taken up space. Madison was changing too. She ended her suffocating engagement and called from a Nashville hotel, crying while eating fries in bed. Evelyn told her to start with being hungry. Madison laughed through tears and ordered a second basket. By summer, Madison had joined the office to handle client intake and had reorganized the entire business in 2 terrifying weeks. Evelyn hated how useful she was. By early fall, Cole made his move. He did not choose a yacht, a rooftop, or anything with hired violinists. He knew better. He brought Evelyn back to the Belmont mansion on a quiet Monday evening. The grand ballroom was empty. No chandeliers blazing. No whispering guests. Only moonlight lying pale across the floorboards. Evelyn stopped in the hallway where she had crashed into him with a glass of champagne. "This is cruel," she whispered. Cole asked if it was. She looked around and realized the room no longer owned her fear. Evelyn smiled and said this was where she had committed beverage assault in public. Cole laughed softly. They stepped onto the dark ballroom floor. She remembered the borrowed blue dress, the suffocating silence, the way everyone had waited for punishment. Now the room felt smaller. Or maybe she had grown. Cole stopped near the center. He said he had once thought power meant control. Then she spilled champagne on him and apologized as if his suit mattered more than the name everyone feared. She had looked at him like a man before she knew he was a warning. In the moonlight, he touched her knuckles, then lowered himself to one knee. The ring was simple and stunning, not a display of wealth but a promise he had chosen carefully. Cole said he did not want to own any room she entered. He wanted to earn the right to stand beside her in it. Evelyn wiped her face and whispered that he was dangerously close to emotional health. Then she said yes. Cole exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for years. She warned him that if he bought her office building as a romantic gesture, she would raise his rent until he suffered. He laughed and kissed her in the place where fear had once introduced them. Their wedding, when it came, was quiet, no empire, no performance, just room for both of them to stand freely. Madison adjusted the veil with surgical precision. Frank stood nearby, personally offended by the number of flowers and pretending not to cry. The ceremony took place beside an old farmhouse under a soft gray sky. No corrupt politicians. No men calling bloodstained crimes business. As Evelyn walked down the aisle, Cole looked at her as if every violent chapter of his life had led him to a clearing where he could finally put down his weapons. Later, by the greenhouse, Evelyn asked if he missed the Empire. Cole did not lie. Sometimes, he said, he missed the cold certainty of obedience, the twisted comfort of being safe, because everyone feared him. Then he looked at their joined hands. Now he still worried about safety. But he slept. Years moved forward quietly. Cole funded local farms, cleaned up abandoned lots, and planted real seeds in neighborhoods his father had once bled dry. Men still tested him. Some regretted it, but he no longer mistook fear for legacy. Evelyn expanded her firm and became known for one terrifying stare that could silence both thieves and board members. She and Cole still fought. He wanted to attack problems. She wanted to endure them until they became unbearable. The difference still sparked. But their arguments were no longer cages. They were doors they learned to open together. They named their daughter June because she arrived with morning light and made the former crime boss cry so hard, Frank threatened to leave the hospital. Years later, June stomped through the greenhouse in yellow boots, happily drowning a pot of basil seedlings. Cole watched the flood with solemn horror and declared the plant was negotiating with death. June looked up and asked if she had ruined it. Cole said the basil was considering its legal options. Then she asked if Mommy had really thrown champagne at Daddy once. Evelyn met Cole's eyes and admitted that historically, yes. Was he mad? June asked. No, Evelyn said. He was confused. Cole brushed soil from his hands and confessed he had been terrified. He had ruled men who feared him. Yet one honest woman with a shaking glass had seen straight through the armor. June accepted this as normal and ran off to flood something else. Far away, Chicago remained dangerous. Here the air smelled of wet earth, basil, and morning. Cole Mercer had once inherited a kingdom built on silence and blood. Now he wore a flower sticker on his wrist because his daughter had declared him fancy. Evelyn no longer made herself small to stay safe. She slipped her hand into his and said the math finally balanced. Across the greenhouse, June called for help, and the man who had once commanded fear knelt in the dirt to teach a child how to keep fragile things alive. Evelyn watched them in the sun and understood the old tragedy had let go. She had not disappeared into his darkness. He had walked out of it, and together they had grown something better.